Welcome to Talk Law Radio with attorney Todd Marquardt of the Marquardt Law Firm at marquardtlawfirm.com.
Welcome back to Talk Law Radio. I'm Todd Marquardt on 9:30 a.m. The Answer. And remember, we're also on podcasts wherever you listen to your podcasts. And if you're interested in other legal subjects, you can go to www.talklawradio.com and you can search for other episodes. You can also search for previous episodes using your favorite podcast listening platform. Just search. And I talk about all kinds of things, mostly estate planning, probate, business law, and elder law, because that's the type of law that I focus on. But I also have experts in other areas of the law who come on the show, and we like to talk about their focuses as well. We talk about what's happening in the news and how that impacts the law, and especially what are the hidden issue legal blind spots that you might be facing but you're not aware of. So back to you, Angela. We're here with Angela Barker with Covenant Nurse Legal Consulting or Legal Nurse Consulting. I was interested in the name of the company. How did you come up with that?
So that's a good question. I'm very my faith is very important to me, and so when coming up with the name of the company, I wanted it to be something that meant that was, I don't know, rooted in God. And so I always remembered, God's covenant, with his people. And so it made me think of like covenant as far as making a pact with, my client that I'm going to do the best I can to help them do their job and with my job, and so it was just, that was the name that came to mind, was the Covenant. And then my pastor actually helped me with the logo. So just on making it more go with the name. So
right, yeah, covenant is like a contract, and that's legal. That's a legal agreement. So I kind of thought that you might be choosing that name because it connected to your faith, and so I was going to look up some Bible verses. Well, there's more than that's, like a whole show or a whole day to talk about every Bible verse where God says, "This is my covenant with you." So maybe we'll try and do that someday. Yeah. And I like the idea of you having a contract with your attorney and for the good of their whole case. We do the same thing with our clients, so it's a contract that everybody benefits from.
Definitely.
So you've been doing this for a while now, and you've probably established some things that make you better than other legal nurse consultants. So what would you say those things are? What part of your secret sauce? What makes you different from everybody else?
I would say I'm definitely, as some people are, competitive. So I hold myself to a high standard. So I want to do the best job that I can do and produce the best work product. But I think it comes more from my background. I was the administrator, and I worked for a national company for 15 years. And so in that role, I was responsible for investigations, as I mentioned earlier, but not only investigations for abuse, neglect, and exploitation, but also investigations for any sentinel event. So with a sentinel event, it would be if we had a patient that passed away or suffered injury. So it was my responsibility to do an investigation, look through the records, and then find out to see if the nurse didn't follow our standards or policies, and then present my findings to our legal department so that we could see, what our next steps, and then prepare for litigation if we thought we were going going to face litigation on that. And so in this role, that gives me the ability to look at both sides. Okay, look at the side where there's, an allegation for like plaintiff side, and, look through the record, as well as point out to them what the defense will find. And then if I'm working defense, I can point out what plaintiff will find. And so just providing that unbiased opinion to where I can show them, okay, these are the strengths, these are the weaknesses of the case, so that we can prepare the right strategy going forward.
So your experience with home health, actually, all of that helps and sets you apart in this role as well.
Yes, because in that role as well, I was kind of the go-to person for compliance. So it was, like I said, a national company, so we had a compliance department that would go in to each office just to make sure that we were maintaining, following policies and procedures and such. And so they were from other states, and they weren't really familiar with Texas. And so usually when they were at another office, they would normally reach out to me and say, okay, what's the standard on this, or what's the regulation.
Yeah.
And so I was very familiar with the regulations, and so I would just show them where I found it in the TAC, the Texas Administration Code, and just also the policies as well. So
yeah, you were studying the law even before you were going to be helping lawyers. That's impressive.
Yeah, and I've always been like very structured, so I like to know rationale behind things as well. So not just, okay, we're going to do it this way, but what's the reason behind it? And so I've always been fascinated with that, to figure that out. And so that's always kind of led me to making sure that I was familiar with the rules, regulations, and standards.
Okay, great. Besides work, what are you passionate about?
Serving my community. So I am very involved in my church, Mercy Church. It's on the south side, and I volunteer in 3 different ministries. So I help out with the kids ministry. So they're a lot of fun, and then I help out with greeting. So that is, I think, that really. I don't know, it just makes my day just to help people feel welcome as they're coming to church, because you never know what difficulty that they're facing. Maybe they're having a tough day, or a tough week, tough life, and just being able to make them feel welcome, to show mercy, as our vision is like show mercy to a broken world, and just being able to show that and try to show God's love to them, that makes my day. Just
I'm sure you make
greeting.
their day too.
Yeah, and I help out in our women's ministry as well.
Okay.
So I make it a point to try to introduce myself to any new women that are joining, and again, try to make them feel welcome and get involved.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, well, let's talk a little bit more specific about Legal Nurse Consulting. And I just found some things on your website that can help guide us through what the different aspects of that are. So one thing is medical records. Medical records in any dispute or legal case is going to be the evidence that either makes or breaks the case.
Yes.
And usually medical records is not just like one piece of paper or one document.
Yeah.
It's often a lot of paper, right? So tell us about that.
So in nursing, typically when we admit the patient, we start the record with our assessment, with all the admission paperwork, and then we build the record as we're providing care, with the different orders, tests, and such. So, and then we close it out when we discharge the patient with our assessment and discharge paperwork. So as a nurse, I'm very familiar with the medical record.
Everything has to be written down, right?
Yes. Yes, everything has to be accounted for. And as they teach us in nursing school, if it wasn't documented, it wasn't done. And so that's what it's so important for nurses to make sure that they're documenting everything, because that's where I've been able to show, like with some nurses, where they documented care or the refusal from the patient. So
Right.
patient refused to be turned, patient refused this, refused that. And so they documented that, so that helped, as far as on their case. Whereas nurses that didn't document, there was nothing to
prove. Right.
Correct. And so with the medical record, it's just going through and determining if there's anything missing from the record. Also, if there's any inconsistencies, anything that needs to be flagged, as we were talking about earlier. Just if there is an incident that happened, and the date that it happened, but some of the documentation doesn't match up. So they went into respiratory arrest, but yet their oxygen saturations show like 100% or 99%, like throughout the whole day. And you're like, okay, what happened here? Like, it showed, I know that this event happened on this day, but yet the record is saying something else. So was, that omitted from the record, or,
So then you would let the attorney know maybe you need to talk to all these people about that.
Yes. As well as determining, in the record. So when reviewing the case, as far as what good expert witnesses would be, to identify, okay, this case is dealing with a patient in the ER, so it'd be good to have an ER nurse, an ER physician, just depending on what the case involves. And so I think just it's an overall review of the record and determination of different aspects, like painting the full picture of what actually happened. And then again, like I said, identifying expert witnesses, and then helping them locate expert witnesses if they need that help as well.
Okay. Now, medical records, I think nowadays have to be electronic. Does that help?
It does. It definitely does, because I know, the agency that I worked for, we were still on handwritten notes. And so when I had to do medical record review, because we had to do quarterly review of the records, sometimes it was really hard to read the nurses' notes because of their handwriting, even though we'd tell them over and over. But yeah, reading handwritten notes is a lot more challenging than electronic. So it makes the review process a lot easier when it's electronic versus handwritten.
Well, when I was in first grade, I got a U on handwriting, unsatisfactory. It was devastating.
Yeah, I bet.
For me to hear that from my teacher. But if she had told me that someday people are going to need to read your handwriting, maybe I would have known how important it was. I'm in that generation that still writes things with a pen. I don't type everything.
Yeah.
I use an iPad now because it's easier than having a bunch of paper on this little table. I'm still in between. How are medical records nowadays? Are they all typed, or are there still some handwritten?
For the most part, they're typed. It's just going to be like the consent forms, or if there's any forms that need signatures, sometimes they'll have to fill out the form.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, and so that's the only time really when you'll see more handwritten, like sometimes the admission paperwork or discharge paperwork maybe.
Okay, well, we have to take another break. When we come back, we'll talk about some specific cases where the evidence was medical records, or where nurses like you, legal nurse consultants, are able to identify the experts that need to testify. So we're going to talk more with Angela Barker with Covenant Legal Nurse Consulting when we return. Stay tuned.
This has been Talk Law Radio with attorney Todd Marquardt, brought to you by the Marquardt Law Firm. You can learn more at marquardtlawfirm.com. And be sure to listen to the full Talk Law Radio show Saturday mornings at 11 on 9:30 a.m. The Answer.
Each week, attorney Todd Marquardt talks about the law. His mission with the Talk Law radio show and podcast is to help you discover your legal issue blind spots. In the beginning, God had one law. Don't eat from the fruit of that tree. Then came the 10 Commandments. Now we have federal, state, and municipal lawmakers that won't stop creating new laws. Laws that might impact you without you knowing it. Listen to the show and drop a line on Facebook or email host@talklawradio.com and let the host know what you think of the show, the topics you want to hear, and whether you want to be a guest.